Can yes?
How did this happen?
Can anybody hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. This is Anna.
Hear us,
talking,
but we can't hear them.
Oh, we can't hear them. Oh,
Hello.
do we have a phone?
Hey, welcome.
There's no phone.
Computer volume, maybe. Oh, that's what's happening.
We heard the ding.
Oh, here, let me see something.
Okay.
As if I know what I'm doing. She's.
I just hope
This
it
is when I tell Roxanne this, I hold it. You don't really know, do you?
I hope it doesn't catch on fire.
Yeah. That's, yeah, okay.
Maybe Jim has.
You're going to be very loud.
Somebody has a chat. Yeah, you want to check out the chat? See if somebody has some suggestions.
The orange one?
I'm looking at whatever.
Orange? Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Candace. We still
Okay,
can't hear
Candace,
anybody.
yeah,
We can't hear anybody
Hey,
else.
can you turn off the computer speaker thing all the way again? Because I thought I heard like a very faint ding when you did that on the speaker side of things. The computer one. No,
The other one.
The other one.
oh, that, I thought, okay.
It's the,
Well, we could mute everything and connect with an iPad or something,
Yeah,
so we can hear what they're saying.
that's audio settings. Oh, for Zoom?
yeah.
Actually, yeah, look under that.
Yes.
Oh, change the speakers to
Where?
maybe
Sharp?
Sharp. Okay.
Sharp. Yeah. Hi,
Hello.
come on in.
Okay.
Okay. Can somebody say something? We just changed the setting. Jamie had something
Can you
too.
hear me?
Yes.
Yay, okay, now we can hear people.
Hey.
So,
But
Terry?
it didn't catch on fire.
Terry, how
Okay,
you
we'll
doing?
wait just a few minutes and then we'll get started for folks on the phone.
We have to figure out the-
Every time we have a robot. Since we have one here.
Kristen,
Left, right? They were pretty much straight.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
is it getting nice outside?
It's pretty nice.
Yeah,
Is
it's definitely warming up.
Oh, good. It looks awesome.
It's probably
I haven't been since
failure
this
to be
morning.
cold. It's not really warm yet, but
I'll take it.
Yeah.
Is it comfortable in here?
oh yeah.
Okay, it
Sure
was
is.
cool whenever I first came in.
Yeah.
I didn't know if I needed to go ahead and turn it off. Just coast through the temperature.
Yeah,
I'll get red and sweaty regardless.
yeah, it's gonna warm up in here.
How about we just go ahead and turn it off? And then,
Yeah, our
Just see
garage
Brad's
faces
email?
north, so our first 6 or 8 feet out of the garage is still a sheet of ice.
Oh, yeah.
Put some salt down, it didn't seem to do anything. I bought a new bag of salt.
Maybe he didn't coffee.
It's environmentally friendly, which probably means it has no salt.
I gotta be on.
Yeah, no, you were right there. You were in the room. I
I
said
know.
Chris Vulture, but maybe I
Yeah.
just included Chris Burnett. I'm sorry.
It's okay, it's easy to mix this up.
Usually check
I have
Chris-
the rugged
Chris and
good
Chris.
looks.
You what?
I have the rugged good looks.
Yes, yes. How you doing? Good.
Chris lost his razor.
The same thing happened to me.
Yeah, okay, good.
Wait,
Isn't it Notre
Yeah,
Dame,
good.
remember?
Yeah, well, I blame the clean-shaven person. Clearly, he's been stealing razors.
There you go.
You know what it is? I've got this theory, because Wayne also is growing a beard right now. It's this primal, colder, winter, early start thing. It's something about the weather.
Well, we have had a lot of snow.
Yeah, it's the snow. We're not used to it.
We missed our spring and we missed our fall. But by
Yeah.
gum, we'll have a good
Yeah.
winter.
I'm from Cleveland, this is what fall is.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I need to reply, I can't reply all now. Okay. I want to get with them.
Yeah.
We get started?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Small group.
Well, yes. Well, thanks for joining us here and on the phone. We know we got several people calling in on this meeting today.
Yeah.
This is the third scheduled meeting of the Youth and Family All Things Missouri scheduled, but then in parentheses, you know, there may be some stuff going forward that we want to get together about. But kind of a brief recap, kind of how we got here today. If you guys missed any of the previous meetings, the first meeting was basically we talked about the All Things Missouri site, kind of went through some of the functionality, and we developed some use case scenarios that could maybe help you guys out in your work. The second meeting that we had, we kind of dove a little deeper into those use case scenarios, came up with some actual some data that would like to be included. This meeting, we're going to do a lot more about the how to actually start implementing that data, kind of like landing on some real actionable type items that we can kind of start moving into next year, into the next phase of this. So I guess probably the first thing we need to do is maybe go around and introduce everybody so the people on the phone know who are here, and then I will turn it over to Melissa.
I'm Melissa.
Yeah.
I'm from CARES and I'll be facilitating today.
Chris Fulcher, CARES.
Kimberly Keller, nutrition, exercise, physiology.
Brad Anderson, 4-H.
Jen Hain, take notes today.
Terry Folks with Missouri After School Network.
I'm Chris Barnett with CARES and heading up the Agricultural and Environment Impact Team.
I'm Angela Johnson with CARES, Health and Safety.
And I am Michael Hardy with the Youth and Family Team. So,
And on the phone,
right, and on the phone we have some people.
This is Jacqueline Benson from Human Development and Family Science.
okay.
Hi, this is Candace Fisher McLean, and I'm a housing and environmental design specialist.
This is Sarah Telepik. I'm with social work.
And this is Jamie Kleinsorge. I'm also with CARES.
Hi, this is Beth Racy Edwards, and I'm in Jackson County with 4-H.
We didn't quite catch that that name on the last call.
This is John Fuller.
Oh, okay.
Oh, hi.
Hi, John. Great. I think that's everyone. So go ahead and get started and make sure I'm sharing. I forgot to do that yesterday.
And for the folks on the phone, are you hearing us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Great.
Yeah, it's fine.
And can you all see the slides?
Yes.
Great. So like
I'm
Michael,
actually,
oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I'm actually on the phone, so no, I can't see the slides, but that's nothing on your end.
Okay. That's good to know, though. We'll make sure that we cover everything verbally. I think we have no problem doing that.
Okay, great.
There's
So-
a dog that you're seeing right now.
There's a super cute meme that you're not seeing. But we can send you the slides if you need to. So like Michael said, the purpose of today's meeting is to prioritize the development for All Things Missouri for 2019. So that's around tools, that's around data and jurisdiction prioritization, as well as some thoughts that we have around feedback and facilitation, basically making sure that CARES is on the right track and listening, continuing to listen in 2019 so that we are developing the needs of extension as well as some outside interests. And our agenda today, first we're going to talk about our use cases, what we've learned, how we've learned that those things as most important, which of those we want to prioritize. And we're also going to talk a little bit about what's public and what's behind a paw print. And that's that value add for extension as well as any sensitive data or sensitive information. Then we'll take a break. Then we'll talk a little bit about data. I know we spent the last impact meeting talking entirely about data. But what we'd like to do is, just a moment. Hey, no problem. Thanks for joining us. So we'll talk a bit about how CARES plans to prioritize data for 2019, and then we'll go through a little exercise about your personal prioritization needs as well as what you think a new CES and or the public needs to see in terms of data. And then finally, we'll wrap up with feedback and facilitation ideas. We'll let you all know what we're thinking, and we'd love to hear what you think would work from that or what else you would need to see, as well as support materials if there's anything that we need to consider that we haven't. Okay, so use cases. So as you all know, you guys have been at the forefront of helping us determine what's useful for extension. These impact team meetings have been awesome, at least from the CARES perspective. I hope they've been a great use of everyone's time because we've sure learned a lot. We've also been running field studies. So we've emailed, I think, every CES, as well as most of the CPDs, and requested feedback, and we've set up dozens of meetings with folks to run these one-on-one field studies and ask, what kind of work do you do? What sort of tech do you use? Let's talk a little bit about data that you might need. We've also attended some RD meetings. Jamie Kleinsorg has done an awesome job. I think she's set up maybe 5 of the 7 regions for training so far and solicited feedback that way. We've also had a table at the summit where folks came up to us, many unsolicited, just, hey, I've got some data. I've got some data that I want. We also sent out a survey to you all. Thank you for your responses. And finally, last but not least, leadership has some needs around data and tools and feedback. So we'll go ahead and get right into those use cases.
You want to say that,
yeah.
Recall we identified 3 use cases specific to this impact team, but then there was some overall use cases that kind of bridge across extension, and that's what we're going to talk more about.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Right,
yeah.
Right. But we're not forgetting about the use cases that this impact team designed and we've discussed a good bit in the last couple of meetings. So.
Right, and many of these global use cases kind of balance many of the impact team's use cases. So like data upload and program data is a big one that I think we're hopefully going to solve with our upload tool and talk a little bit more about sharing that primary data like after school care. So the first set of use cases are around what's publicly available. So we call this a county council report. Some other folks have other thoughts about how this might be used, but we were thinking based on the feedback we've heard this week, again, as well as the last several months, of having kind of two versions of that on All Things Missouri. One would be a short version, a lot of iconography, really briefly describing a county with some benchmarking, some trends over time data, but something that's really, here's a snapshot view. And we heard yesterday and then this morning that it might be really great to frame those around the grand challenges identified by extension. And we've kind of listed several data sets or data areas there: demographics, workforce information, vulnerable populations, natural resources, economic climate, to sort of try to touch on a lot of different things.
We also heard the health data.
We did, yes. I did not, I'm sorry, I didn't add that to the slide. So kind of touching on a broad array of information. And to be honest, meeting this week, some people were like, hey, that's great. That sounds fantastic. And then some folks, especially this morning, sort of pushed back and said that might just be too broad. Who is your audience? So we wanted to talk through that with you all a little bit.
The concept, though, is similar to what we were talking about before with our CES report, but this is more pared down and more for broader consumption. And we're thinking maybe just a 1 or 2 page.
With the short version.
Short version of this that would be a little bit more approachable through either some nice graphics or simple.
Maybe not just like data, but more more appealing to grab your attention and to look at.
And I can bring up that district data sheet. Oh gosh. Oh, okay, sorry. It's so far away. look at it. It's a first. Fantastic. Okay, no, and that's not even the right site. Sorry, people. People on the phone, I'm going to engagements.missouri.edu. We have an example there of what we called our district data sheets, but it's sort of a snapshot of the UM system impact.
Right. We did this cooperatively with the folks in government relations. Have done so for several years.
And this is something that's been really well received by the legislature, by folks in the field, just as an easy snapshot. And so this would not necessarily be a direct template, but an example of that two-pager. You know, some basic information about a region, benchmarking information, either, you know, some suggestions have been around having benchmarks from the state level data or surrounding counties or other urban areas in Missouri, things like that. So this would sort of be dynamic to a region. So for example, if I'm in St. Louis and I want to, you know, produce this report with a benchmark against Kansas City and sort of understand what's going on in both regions, that might be an option. Again, this is just an example of a kind of the two-pager, what that might look like, balancing images and data and making it more easily accessible.
So reactions or thoughts around this is a concept of one of the things we need to develop within All Things Missouri.
So it would be kind of like this, you're saying?
Similar, like 2 pages with some nice friendly graphics and a lot of numbers in there, but hopefully not
Kind of
too overwhelming.
The 30,000 foot view of just.
Because I've always liked that, what you just showed.
Yeah.
People like seeing it at home for us, that one side that shows our home.
Yeah.
I think anything you can do to identify themes for the reader, just in 2 seconds less. Oh, theme is a help.
We were originally thinking that we would go with the 4 impact areas on it, so you had ag environment, youth, families.
Okay.
But again, one of the suggestions was that we also can frame it within the grand challenge that Martha Stewart presented at the summit. You know, the workforce and health.
Economic opportunities, health and education and
Thank
success.
you.
Something like that.
So we may we're going to toy with those.
Yeah.
But you're right that it needs to. People need to be able to say, okay, I'm in healthcare. Where's the health information?
Right.
Well, yeah, I've seen you kind of look at the page, and maybe it's because I'm mentally lazy, but I look at something, I want to orient myself pretty quick. If it's a hodgepodge, I have to figure out how it all fits together. I'm probably going to move on.
Okay.
Yeah. So do you have any suggestions, like thematically?
Just as you hit your key themes, maybe putting them in bold or something, just something that stands out.
Or maybe a little icon next to each one. that
Yeah,
says,
yeah.
You know, here's a cow. Here's a hospital.
Sure, because it's really attractive and it's very obviously well-written, user-friendly. Anything you just to help narrow, get them to where you want them to be.
Personally, I like the grand challenges area because a lot of folks are working across multiple areas.
Yeah.
So I think that helps people to kind of see. It does messaging on 2 levels, basically where the organization's priorities are, and it helps people kind of dovetail in where they might fit. Okay.
And again, this is also going to be publicly consumable. So this would be your folks in the counties, your the advocates, so the general public can also sort of see how we're framing university approaches that way.
It's consistent messaging across the organization.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I think stakeholders, commissioners, those grand challenges are the things that came up across the state, right? So that people are interested in and worried about, and so yeah, if we have the data split into those, I think they'll like that. I think that would be well received by. And I also think it'll be less messy. Well, does food systems go under ag or? Good point.
Right.
Right. So Michael was involved in designing the sheet we saw up there. So you can just put this out really good.
Yeah.
It's already done. I had a half day off on Monday. I just
Amazing how much time it takes to create something so simple and accessible.
Right. I go across the hall and I say, Dave, could you do this? Build it for us. So.
Can we see it again real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Thanks for asking. Here's
The way this was designed is there's a lot of data on the front page and then more context on the second page.
Okay, yeah. because the front page has got these like students, employees, like I can zoom right in on what I'm trying to see.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Those little icons for your eye and titles.
It just gets a little wordy, even though it's really, this is, I'm sure.
Well, the way that this was kind of designed is that the first page is kind of specific to a county or a district, like a House or Senate district, and the second page is more like a big splash of your statewide data. So
it remains fairly constant.
I really like that for, like I said, giving to our commissioners, our legislators. It's very useful.
Something you can hand out in the elevator.
Yeah, yeah. Our council members even, they don't realize how many students from our, go to MU, and kind of making that connection is big, I think.
The data that we've heard. Actually, I have to go back to the slide. Sorry. Technologists. So we've kind of heard some demographic, workforce, population, natural resources, economic climate, and health data. Is there anything that we're missing or other things we need to consider around this data? Like, is this inappropriate? You know, and I know it's hard because Missouri, it's difficult to have a single shoe fit every area in terms of even what you're looking at.
If you're adding health, I would maybe just make sure that education is either up in the other areas or add education as a separate bullet.
Okay.
Education is one of the grand challenges, so yeah.
Yeah.
It should be there.
True. Yeah. Okay. Great.
Um,
I'm wondering about agriculture. You're not. That's not us. So, but I know. I think, where could we fit some of them?
Yeah, I think we're and we're going to be including environment too with natural resources. So we're going to make sure that we're touching on those things. Agriculture is going to be more from the economic standpoint.
Right, economic opportunities.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the challenge on this one is going to be kind of keeping it as streamlined as possible because it can very easily spiral out. And I know that we, our plan is we've got the second report that we're going to talk about a little bit, but any guidance that we can kind of get to keep it focused on kind of grand ideas.
So is the intention to have this be an annually updated thing?
Either annually or if we do it right and have it as a document that's database driven, it could be updated continuously, depending upon data refresh. One element may update and the other won't, but
it'll be a living document.
We would have to have it dated.
And then if we hear significant feedback around what we're presenting, then updating that as we can.
But it would also be something that could be printed out or printed here and sent out to the offices out in the counties that they can keep on the corner of the desk.
I guess my question, where I was heading with this, is there may be some key data points that we would want to highlight for a year, and then maybe those key data points to kind of refresh the whole thing, maybe look a little bit different a subsequent year or something like that.
Sure. That's an interesting point.
Yeah.
How do we steward this into the future?
Well, that makes sense because even on the district data sheet, every so often people are like, well, this isn't as important this year. But we have this real estate on the page, so let's move something else in there that is kind of like public construction. So.
So then consider in our governance groups,
Mm-hmm.
which we'll get to later. Okay, so if there's no more thoughts around that, I'm going to move on because we do have a.
Well, the folks on the phone, did they have folks on the phone have any comments before we move on to starter maps?
Thank you.
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay. You may need to see if there's anything in chat.
Yeah, thank you.
No. That's probably not.
Okay, thank you.
You should be getting better. This is
I
your
know.
fourth one.
I got used to go-to meeting, and now I'm like, ooh. Okay, so more questions. We'll move on to starter maps. And so something that we had heard a lot of feedback about was the starter maps that we had on the site already. And that was something that CARES had populated in All Things Missouri around the impact areas. So if you go to the home page, and I'll make this a little bigger, hopefully. And so we had a lot of feedback. It sticks out in my mind, of course, the Ag and Environment group. What do you mean agriculture? What do you mean environment? What are you showing us? And so we want to get this right. We realize the value of having starter maps it's an entry point into more data. And so one of the suggestions that had come up yesterday that we had kind of run with was sort of having a question that would be answered by the map. That would hopefully prompt people, if we do this the right way, to add more layers to understand the landscape a little bit better. And so what's a good one? Michael, what do you think? Food access, that's always fun. Yeah. So here's an example of, one of the starter maps we have up on the site. And this, we could frame this in terms of a question, but a larger question to you all is, what should we be including in these starter maps for your group?
Just to get everybody on the same page, the whole purpose of the starter map is to have a way that people could come in and see what the mapping technology is all about without having to get in and build their own map and we also, it has another purpose or another method would be that we want to look attractive to people, that they would want to click on this, because people are hesitant to click on some things sometimes if it looks a little too complicated or intimidating. So we want something that's friendly looking, that actually leads them into the data and encourages them to interact is the whole purpose there.
And something that we learned, I'll say I learned at the West Central meeting last week was, you say, what data do you need? And people just kind of stare at you like, I have data, I don't know, I don't need data. I'm like, yeah, you do. And this would be hopefully a way to lead them, like prompting them with a question or a scenario. Yeah. Go take a look at a map. It's not scary. It shouldn't be scary. This is data. Like, this is your region. This is, Greene and Lawrence County. This is where you are.
And maybe it would lead them to asking more questions.
Yeah, that's the hope. Why is there a food desert here?
So I guess one of the things we want to discuss with this group is just the whole concept of maybe a better approach to the starter maps. Mm-hmm. Things like having that question or some sort of headline about the maps or something like that. And then which starter maps would be important to covering the topics that this impact team feels is sort of under your jurisdiction.
Do you have it set up so that those with the most clicks automatically get moved to the front?
No, right now the starter maps are somewhat pre-populated with selected data sets from us. Okay. So they don't change much over time.
Yeah.
But you mean the maps themselves?
Yeah, so like if somebody's always clicking on agriculture, then agriculture
at the bottom there?
Yeah, the agriculture
so
moves to the first.
Yeah, no, we don't. But
I
that's
like
not
that.
hard to do. Yeah.
Okay.
Spoiler alert, youth and families will be up like a number 2.
Not number 1?
I'm working on it.
That's a great suggestion.
So scroll to the youth and family ones that we have. Keep going there.
Mental health.
It's
food access.
mental health and food access. What's community starter map?
Home loan organizations,
foreclosure. Community related.
They're all kind of, yeah. But if we're missing the mark here on something that you say, there's a basic piece of information we feel is important for people to know about youth and family. Mm-hmm. We can make a starter map around that.
Yeah, I mean, something around education would probably be
useful.
We did talk earlier today about having some of these maps that would meet the grand challenges and kind of complement what we're putting out in the 2-pager report. So that's currently some of what we're thinking in terms of what we will pre-populate. We're also talking about kind of relying on users who make maps as well.
I love your descriptions underneath. If there's any mystery, they can easily tell what it is they're going to learn.
Yeah. In some ways, like kind of doing the question, I like how it looks right now also. So maybe there's a way to do like the question at the top or to embed the question in there, because I think this is very clear and like direct. And I like being able to see some of like the layers there before I click on it. So I wouldn't want you to just have a question and take this away.
Okay.
It's interesting how close you guys are to the health and safety team.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we said this morning. So we had some discussions about like how we could incorporate maybe both of those philosophies into this.
And descriptions are powerful and tell you what you get, and questions are also limiting and tell you and kind of imply, you know, what
this
you,
is the only
this
thing
is
you're
it.
going to learn on this one.
Right. Yeah.
And there could also be an opportunity for questions, like once you get into the map. Like if did you know we also had information on poverty or other layers or other maps?
I love that. And then you have the prompt at the place where you're going to be doing other things.
Yeah, I like that better too. Like, right. Because I wouldn't want it to be like, what is mental health like in your community? That's all you can do here. That's not my question right now. Whereas, like, I would play around with the mental health one because from after school, I'm like, oh yeah, after school can help with this. And like, let me add some layers here.
Yeah, and that's the whole reason for these starter maps is to get people to do things like that. So these are good ideas for encouraging interaction, encouraging exploration, and hopefully getting people to understand a little bit more about the world around themselves. That, I guess, is the ultimate goal. Don't forget, though, that the starter maps aren't the end all of all this. One of the reasons, there to introduce the map room and so on, we want to encourage people to go in and explore all the data sets that are available through All Things Missouri. This is just a nice example, perhaps even a shortcut. I don't know if we want to talk about the map gallery at this point, or is that later on in the discussion?
I think we should. I mean, the last couple meetings, it seems to segue really well. And, you know, to the point about sort of crowdsourcing popularity and what shows up first, we've also talked about what goes behind the paw print, what resources and data are extension only or even a subset, but we can talk a little bit more about that. And having talked about the CES reports a lot, we learned that, well, every county is different, every area is different, every 4-H is different in every area, you know. It's incredible, but extension does a lot in a lot of different areas with a lot of different needs. And so something that we want to move away from us being the experts, because we're not. We are facilitators with technology. We kind of foresee this sort of drag and drop approach where reports are customizable, again, behind that paw print, where people can share those out. And maybe we have some sort of ranking system, but on the CES, again, in Greene and Lawrence County, and my specialty is livestock. And I share that out, and someone else in Gentry County goes, okay, a lot of this is applicable to me. I see your report, and now I can add some other indicators that are more important for where I am. So all of that would be behind the paw print. And similarly, we would do the same with a map gallery, where here's like, you know, health and safety or however we organize those, but having something available to the CESs that's based on their knowledge, or field staff, or faculty, whoever.
So it would be similar to the starter maps. Let's say Terry went in and made a map in the regular map room and saved it to the map gallery. And you've made the map for Boone County. And it's showing the data sets you want to show and all this. You could save that to yourself in a map gallery and come back to that again later, and all the data would be right there. The great thing is you can share that out then to other folks in Extension. They can say, well, I'm in Caldwell County, but I want to know that same information. I see Terry's map. That's got exactly what I see. They would just go to Terry's map and type in Caldwell County at the top, and set them over there, show them the same information. And so you've got a map gallery that's useful not just by you, but by all the folks in Extension that would need that same information. So it's the reason we bridged into this from the starter maps is it's akin to the starter maps, but the map gallery can have a lot of things in it, be searchable, and be more broadly used than by extension.
Right, and hopefully more responsive to folks' needs as things are happening.
So that's some of the feedback we heard from really the specialists and so on the field. What does this group think of that concept of saving maps and reports to be used by others.
Sounds good to me.
Is that a practice already done an extension to a certain extent? Do you have templates that you share or things like that?
Well,
Is this going to be a new
maybe
concept?
on campus. Well, we do for F&E county program report templates, things like that, but I don't know that most program areas do that. So with these maps, these user-created maps, then there'd be some sort of tagging mechanism that they could, that whoever the map creator is would be able to tag them with like a specific program name or something like that to help other people
You'd
find
be
them.
able to title them and remind me of, but we did this on another system. Did we used to let them type in a paragraph or something about that?
That
How
was
would title them? What's that?
Yeah, very issues.
Okay.
Right. But I mean, in our document repositories, definitely. And something we brought up at one of the meetings yesterday was, sort of tagging governance. So do you have, by the impact areas, like you have required tags, for findability purposes, having program tags, but if somebody has a lowercase version of a program versus an uppercase version. So something we need to be conscious of. But I think we've heard this already, like it's something that we have to do if it's going to be a searchable report or not.
Let's say about you.
I was just curious.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me also frame this. We don't want a lot of noise there with a lot of the gallery things with some that are less than stellar products and others that are really great. That's why we're looking at a governance framing. I'm talking with Blake. This is toward the end of our day here. We were going to talk about this, but this is a good time to bring it up. It's more of a curation role of saying, what are some of the 3 to 4 best templates that we could share most broadly? And that may be part of what this group reconstituted, who's missing from the table, who wants to stay in terms of an ongoing governance role.
Advisement on how, you mentioned before popularity of something, like Google PageRank. Popularity is part of it, content's part of it, and then some overlord is saying, actually, these are the 3 best maps. All the CESs need to see this because
Overlord, I like that.
thanks, I'll accept more pay with the titles.
But yeah, there's definitely all or nothing.
Right.
A combination makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
If I'm understanding this correctly, and I may not be, when I roll it, say I'm a CES rolling into a region, and I'm going to have a meeting that involves Beth's content area or a content area, there's going to be people within the organization in each region that I think of as thought leaders, maybe. And so if it happens to be Beth, for example, I might want to go into Beth's collection there because she's going to be more likely to have what I need in the context that's going to serve me best. So I see this as kind of an extension and maybe even a magnification of that.
Yeah.
Something that's already happening in
Or
practice.
maybe before you roll in, you call Beth and say, hey, look, I'm going to be in this area. Maybe you could throw something together for me real fast.
Hey, Beth.
Very funny. Very funny.
And you can search by maybe who it is, but you might be able to search by topic. Say you
Right.
with a swine team or something. You don't know anything about swine. You could search for swine maps and documents.
Yeah.
Pull that out.
They must not know what I do, Brad, if they're as talking about swine teams.
So that's the concept. Any other input for us on that? On the concept, and that carries over to reports too. You can share a report framework with the indicators that you want. One of the things that came out of the feedback is that this CES report that I think we talked about a time or two in our previous meetings, where we said we'd like to give something to CESs to use. We're having trouble coming up with that unified sort of snapshot that a CES would want in the big state. We have a lot of topics in this state, so we finally.
At least 3 flavors of CES.
Yeah. So we've kind of come up with the concept of maybe we'll have a very basic thing for people to build on, but we've had this drag and drop report that you could easily add to that and save to yourself as that template. And we would show the CESs how to use that. Carrying on. Might be because even within the same CES, the same person you know, from one week to the next. They've got different things they're looking at. So it's a moving target anyway.
And that target may move based on the needs of the community.
Yep. As it should. Any thoughts from folks on the phone?
Nothing from me.
So we're not hearing that we're off target here on any of this. This all seems acceptable and still within the framework of all things Missouri. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the public. What's something you want to do there?
Take it away.
Okay.
Gesundheit.
Yes, bless you. You see on the slide here, we've got sort of that public area at the top, and then we talk about a behind the paw print. The public area, those would be accessible by, you know, literally the public. Anybody out there on the internet could come in and use these tools, see that information. The behind the paw print is really has multiple purposes for this, and this may also extend to behind subscription as we start moving into some of the income supported areas. But the behind the paw print is to allow extension folks to have a sort of a working area that you can use to help you conduct your job, to maybe allow you to access tools and information that aren't public or maybe even shouldn't be public, but should be used with an extension. And if we start talking about subscription opportunities, this could be the same type of area where we would maybe set up tools that people come in and pay to use. And we use AgSci up here as an example that we could offer subscriptions to people or entities that would come in, access that tool, and use it for their purposes. And maybe the AgSci tool would also be available without subscription to all of the extension folks who offer it. So we can work both ways on that within this system. So that's kind of the concept or the background behind this paw print area is both for working together, but also for as we have to move into some more of these fiscally conscious areas, we would look for opportunities for revenue streams or something like that through this area. Does that make sense to folks as a discrete thing for the public?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And is it similar to the IKEA, you know, the IKEA effect? The more work you put into something, the more proud you are of the results. That's why they don't have a brownie mix that you just add water. You have to add milk and an egg because it sells better. But similarly, I think sometimes the things you pay for are the things that you're going to value the most. So it makes sense to, and of course, it has obvious benefits as well.
Well, and having some information behind the paw print also positions the extension specialist to be that sort of, I don't want to say, but what's the word I'm looking for? That shepherd or that conduit of the information, that resource that can help you interpret that information through these tools and maybe tap into additional things. So we're not saying that everybody who wants an AgSci report has to have a subscription. They could come to an extension office, work with them to get the report, etc. But if they wanted to access it on their own without going through extension, well, there's a way to do this, and that's the subscription.
Any other thoughts around other resources? Kind of that last point before we talk about data upload. Anything else that might pair well with the maps and reports behind the paw print or other information?
This is Beth. I have a question. If they have a paw print, are they going to be able to save their previous maps in there?
Yes.
That's
okay.
One of our challenges is trying to figure out just which set of paw prints, because technically I think paw prints are across all 4 campuses. We need to pare that down.
I think that's an issue we can bring up with John Myers in terms of the paw prints limited to extension, or I think we can get at that somehow. Yeah.
How about with people? How about with community members with a subscription? Will they also be able to save?
I think so. It depends on the specific tool they have a subscription to. We're not going to be opening up all the things that extension can do to a subscription. Subscriptions are going to be more targeted around either specific data or specific tools right now in our mind. anyway.
You want to be consistent where possible
Right.
between subscription and what's behind the paw print.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. There may be some things, but we want to try to keep this as consistent as possible because we want to scale this.
But clearly the answer to the can they save would be yes with the subscription.
Yeah.
Uh,
Thank you.
And I know there's also, talk about some researchers that are not necessarily directly part of Extension, but affiliated with Extension that we also keep in mind if, we're working together and we limit this to Extension, then what? What about those people? And getting their data and getting their feedback and getting their information in all things Missouri. A lot of things to consider there. So sort of related is uploading data. And that's something that we've heard a lot about, uploading my primary data, uploading, again, after school programs, after school care, understanding that. And something that we've had a lot of discussion about is, okay, if I upload my data, then it's just going for my personal information and my own personal report. That's one thing. But the power of, primary data is sharing that out with other people, or one big power, and understanding how that relates to other people's data or common data. And we've talked a little bit about different ways that we can have sort of data governance and what we need to be conscious of, like personally identifiable information, FERPA, HIPAA, somebody puts that, teen pregnancy data in an area where there's only one teen and there's one teen teen pregnancy, we have to be really conscious of this.
And I know that Jamie brought up yesterday is that people won't be able to go ahead and upload data unless they've gone through training.
Yeah,
With all the things, with the things that you said is no personally identifiable data. Here are some here are things that you can do. So really being focused on if you want to upload data, you're going to need to be certified in some way to be able to do that.
Right. And then if you're sharing data or making it public, that needs to go through a more rigorous process.
Yeah.
Who vets that, who curates that, who makes sure that this has Extension's name on it, then it's kind of a bigger deal than just you uploading data to a random site.
And it may be over the first year that they don't make it publicly available. Maybe we just need to really see and learn from this year how we do it from a governance standpoint in terms of each of the impact areas. We don't want to put too much of a load on any one governance group. We shouldn't just necessarily throw everything out
right
in terms of what they could do. I'm just
less is more when you're just getting started.
When you're talking about data, are you talking data broadly, or are you talking like text-based data versus like photos, sound?
It could be both.
That's a great question.
That in a folder, as we've done with previous systems, it could be a combination of tabular data being converted to a map. It could be a video, it could be an image, it could be PowerPoint, etc. So we've got to think through what that is.
Right.
Why were you thinking that? What was?
Data encompasses a lot of things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I mean.
Yeah, we can
yes.
limit this. Yeah, but we can limit this and say we're not going to post images and videos. Or no word.
I was just wondering where the thought.
In the past, we've had it where you link to videos that are posted on other sites or uploading images, uploading PowerPoint. So we ran the gamut. And Jamie, are you on the phone? I don't know. Jamie, if you could speak to what you've done with Community Commons before, and some groups really use that multimedia dimension a lot more than others. You may be on mute.
Hi, yeah. So you're referring to the docs area?
Yes.
Yeah, and even like blog posts with images.
Yeah, so we did have some groups that were very successful in using that functionality, again, to reiterate, sharing presentations and other types of media that they had created across their initiative. One group that was very successful was Creating Healthy Communities Ohio, where they had 22 counties across the state of Ohio, and being sort of a large geography that Ohio is, much like Missouri, they never really came together to talk about things except for annually. And so having that centralized repository really helped. One thing that we noted, though, was that because they had a couple of state level folks that were driving those conversations and driving the sharing, that's why we felt they were more successful than others. And so I think that's something that we would need to consider moving forward, is if there were folks within each impact area that could carve out, not a large chunk of time, but even just, an hour a week to reach out and ask folks like, hey, can you share that presentation that you did? I heard that it was great, or I see that you made a really good map. What do you plan on using that for? That can make a really big difference and start to model behavior. And once that starts, then people really get on a roll, and that moderator role does lessen over time.
Thanks, Jamie. So we have to think through how to manage that, and just because you can do it technically, does that serve us well?
And I think you mentioned at one of the meetings sharing some images and like the compelling nature of, kind of in storytelling and getting people excited about a program and things like that. And yeah.
I'm also thinking kind of along these lines, and you mentioned this, Melissa, the opportunity to upload data and have it branded under someone else's name can be tremendously appealing to anybody with a special interest, political groups, things like that. Then you can cite the data, cite the source, and it's actually the stuff that you put up there. So policing that and discerning that is going to be...
it's becoming more apparent to us that we're going to have a vetting process before any data goes public anyway. There may still be good opportunity to upload for yourself or upload for a working group you're a part of. But
and it may be part of the role of the governance groups to think through, what does this mean? Is this being uploaded and this person wants to share it more broadly or make it publicly available? What do we have time. We don't have to just throw it out there, as I said before. So that might help.
one of the things we want to be careful with on that, though, is that we don't set up so many rules that it's a real barrier to making data available to the public.
Right.
So there's a balancing act.
Well, we never had it before at all. So what I'm saying is if we stage this right and we're deliberate and then opening it up.
I think it's one of the real selling points of All Things Missouri is that we are helping to move that data from a local, inaccessible sort of area to something that is more open and accessible. So, it's a real balancing act, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would we have any constraints on like the size of like the data?
Yeah, we're going to have to put in. You're not going to be able to upload terabytes of information. We got to put some size limits in.
People can
some
store
things.
their movies up there.
And you're not going to want to upload huge data files. I will say that our traditional approach to that has been that if you have something very large, very complex, we would encourage you to come work more directly with us on something like that. I don't know how that's built into the All Things Missouri sort of framework, but that's been our tradition in the past.
Well, do you all use Box?
Yes.
I mean, so
And
maybe some stuff would be more appropriate to use.
That's definitely right.
There's
we
nothing
don't want to
appropriate
replicate. We don't want to replicate
Right.
Box.
Right.
We don't want to take on the role of Box.
Yes, that's
We're
right.
mainly looking for this as it relates to All Things Missouri, not to store all your files for
Program,
working.
because I was
in.
thinking like, PowerPoints and stuff, maybe that would be better. I don't know.
But I wonder if there's a way we can like link to, or not necessarily
Yeah.
integrate with Box, but just say like, hey, I've got this PowerPoint on Box,
Yeah.
and describe it and tag it and do all the
Sure.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that's actually good, is maybe, because you asked the original question about multimedia, now maybe we just really narrow it around saving maps and reports and uploading data, kind of what our core value is, and then the ability to link to those other things. And you can share, you can have those hyperlinks to a Box where you get access.
Yeah.
As soon as we get it all worked out, the university will change away from Box.
I know. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, some of the things
Sorry,
that you might
Senator.
have
No.
in there that people might be interested in uploading are things like newspaper reports of programs that are happening. That you would be able to then geocode exactly where
true.
those things happen.
We've had the geotagging in here.
Right. Photo voice projects where people,
Yeah.
and I think 4-H has been active in like doing community mapping, GIS work. That would be data here that could potentially be part of a data set.
Yeah.
Well, again, back to the reason for doing this, we're trying to outline and define some of our mission for the next calendar year on this. There's a lot of ideas, and I think we need to not only better define the ideas, but prioritize the ideas. Are these things that we've got bulleted here something you would see as high priority? Or is there something that we're missing on this bullet list?
One thing I heard you say that I thought was really critical is the ability to have your own space so that maybe the data you upload isn't public, but it's still usable for you and your working group.
That's kind of under that concept of the sharing folder, although it would be an unsharing folder, I guess.
Okay. I wasn't
but
sure
it would
if
be
that
a
was-
folder
That's
that
a
you
good
could choose to share or choose to keep yourself. And actually not the whole folder, it would be
The profile.
data element by data element within
Yeah.
the folder you could choose to share or not share, right?
That's a good point. Yeah.
But yeah. Do folks know that we list data for decision makers up here? That's the exceed information. We're hoping to integrate that a little bit more strongly into the extension accessible areas. And speaking of that, another concept of having this subscription is if you were to offer some sort of course or training that you could tie to All Things Missouri, one of the things that could be offered through this and a subscription is they would come in and pay for the subscription, and a chunk of that be for the class, and then a chunk of that be for them to continue to be able to access the classroom-related materials through All Things Missouri for a certain period of time after the class.
Nice.
So we want to use this to help, and maybe that would entice people to come in and take your class, is to have this value add that they can carry away for a period of time after. So we're thinking of somehow joining All Things Missouri with some of the more traditional roles of extension in that way. Does that sound like a good concept?
I think it's great myself.
Not something I would use. I think, yeah, that some other specialists might be use.
Okay.
Like, I could see some of the ag or I'm not seeing any of my programs where I could use them.
If you do ISC on data analysis, that might be something that a certain segment of the population would be able to tie into and use, but
Yeah.
you know.
I would not be doing an ISC on data analysis, but
I thought we were connected here.
But yes, I think that would be very useful for others.
Well, somebody brought up in relationship to some sort of nurse training.
Oh, yeah, nursing
Yeah.
outreach.
Nursing outreach and so on. Yeah. We're thinking we could type.
And Rescue has some exciting content.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with e-extension at all? This seems like what that could have been.
Yeah.
A comment there for you, Chris.
Yep.
Yep.
Oh, great.
Thanks, Mike.
What else did we have for this paw print area? You missing anything, guys? Michael, what do you think?
Well, I'm trying to think what we've talked about before. I know that, a lot of people really seem like they were keen on the being able to share stuff around, even if that's like let's go PowerPoint or something like that. Share out that, like a slide or something.
Customizable maps and reports.
Right.
You share your map. Oh, that was another thing. People were talking about, first off, if you share a map or report, that maybe there ought to be some sort of quality rating system on that, like Amazon has with their 4 stars.
Oh, yeah.
Let's say this is a great report from there. This is a wonderful map. Or this one stinks, and it gets pushed down to the bottom. The other thing was they were talking about some way to relate activity within All Things Missouri back to your annual performance review. What was that? That came up in 2 separate impact groups.
So is this like the idea that map creators get like the Amazon top rater?
Yeah, and you can raise them. Yeah, I don't know.
Researchers, like, it's sort of publishing, like, putting your data out there.
What were they saying about
Something
that?
like that.
Yeah, it's kind of like, if you're doing and you're publishing research,
Also
you're also
that
putting your
Everybody gets very creative.
And we're going back and forth with the rating thing. Is again, there'll be a lot of noise in there over time, and we've got to make sure it's got to be skinny and really good material rather than a whole lot that you've got. This is 5 stars. Who gave it 5 stars? And, you know,
It's like
that gets kind of all of the CARES team really gives Chris Barnett 5 stars. It's just because we want to.
Right.
I know. I get so tired of that.
For my evaluation's coming up, I need to get my badge, so
Yeah,
I need
yeah.
to fill it with a bunch of junk so that I get the,
Get your badge, yeah.
We can code some bots, right? We can code some bots to go just really rank up this.
Yeah, I think Dave's working on that right now.
We have a top 10 list of access.
Yeah.
Days, right?
Yeah, access is another good one. Like,
I think we should. I think we should tag this to our annual review performance and just code us.
I was gonna say for you all, it's
I know.
special, right?
I'm just thinking.
Grant funds aren't gonna cover that.
Oh, we can always extend it. You know, just kind of,
Maybe an addendum.
you know, the governance groups. Yes. Okay, I'll stop that line.
Do you want to bring up their case study slide just as a reminder of the things we talked about before we head into either a break or the next topic? I don't know what your plan is.
Break, I think.
You recall we talked about these 3 areas, and this trends over time is rather vague. It kind of applied to multiple types of data, but it's something we really need to do. But those were a couple of things we had talked about and brought to the forefront. You had other case studies, but these were the kinds of ones that sort of we thought came to the top on that. For the folks on the phone, the case studies were site selection and approval tool for nutrition educators. The second one was program data collection and reporting tool. And then the third one is making sure we have more trends over time data as the case needs that we wanted to have for this particular impact area.
And so I kind of see our global use cases sort of fulfilling at least the needs at the start for the top 2, the program data collection and then the site selection tool. So the data collection, at least for right now, could be facilitated by uploading that somebody's personal data or work data around, and then tying it around to other publicly available or paw print available data sets, and then sharing that out with an extension. And then the site selection and approval tool seems like sort of a template. So if I'm in a county and I have all of this data around, hopefully around the state, I could be that expert to create sort of, this is the report or the map that would help that site selection, and then share that out behind that paw print. And other people could use to it and add their own information if they need to. So
you think providing more of a generic, broader framing for those first 2 that accommodates all 4 impact areas?
Well, I see those being examples of a generic framework that we proposed earlier, like the drag and drop report. You know, that's something, program data collection. If I can upload my own data to add to those other data sets like gerontology, healthy homes, human trafficking, you know, if we have publicly available sets tying in my own personal data, and then that's my data collection and report for my program. And the same with site selection, sort of the mapping aspect of that.
So I just had a thought when I was listening to that. I actually heard 3 levels of access to data. Okay. And one is like the publicly available, it's kind of out there for everyone. And then behind the paw print, things that we're willing to share within like 4-H and after school data would be great to layer with each other.
Yeah.
But I have other after school data that I would need to never let anyone outside of my immediate team. So if that might be like a value add for extension, if we can, before something becomes completely public in this year waiting period or stuff, be able to turn on each other's layers if we designate that it's internally available.
So your thinking is really consistent with previous systems that we've had, providing pretty much along those lines. Is what is to your own profile? What do you share internally? What do you agree to make public?
You know, the added twist on this, I think this would address what you're saying, Terry, is that, and what one of our other impact teams brought up, they said it'd be great to pick from a list of people
Yeah.
exactly who they want to share with, rather than sharing with group X and group
Right.
Y. And that we haven't done that before, but we think if we can work with and through the single sign-on and get that list going, we could bring up the list of people and say, okay, I want to share with these 5 people.
So to me, that's a fourth layer within this, that comes in between what I had thought that I had heard was kind of available to anyone in extension.
Okay.
And available just to me is I want to make it available just to these people.
So what if those
It
are,
could still be the 3.
Okay.
One of them would be an option, everyone, or select people.
Right, and that's true.
I mean,
and maybe we don't have the option to share it to everyone in extension because, as you said earlier, it's a little foggy to tell exactly who should be included in that everyone in extension, who shouldn't, and maybe.
What do
that's
you
just
all
not
think?
the
I mean,
right
is that-
boundary.
I like the idea of being able to say my data is to everyone in extension because I may not know who I need to share it with. Like there's probably someone that I have not connected with, and so I wouldn't know to check their name or even to check their unit. But if they saw after school data in a mapping room as a data layer that they now have access to, and it had maybe as part of the metadata my name and my description of where I got this, so that they have some confidence in putting it on or ability to follow up with me to ask me questions. I think that could start new relationships that don't exist.
That's great. So you're talking about 4 levels then.
Yeah.
The public, all of extension, a list of people you would pick, and just yourself.
So, okay, that sounds good. I'm wondering about sharing by impact area. Sorry. I apologize, I'm double dutying here. So I want to really build on this point. I've got American Eagle I'm trying to work with. But I'll come back to that because do we have an onboarding by impact area?
Well, again,
Does that make sense
to
with what
that,
we've heard?
no, I think we've heard that the impact areas are too fuzzy.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're too fuzzy.
Especially with data, it doesn't belong in one bucket
What if-
hardly ever.
Okay, so if someone uploads data, there's going to be a governance associated with those data. And so the person that uploads it will be the owner of the data? So
At least initially, yes.
Right.
As part of that upload.
So they would be able, going along with what this discussion just was, they would be able to say, okay, these 3 people I want to share this data with. And then if someone else has requests to access those data, that the owner would then be the contact. So if Terry has these data
I
that
see.
she's sharing with 3 people, I would like to see or use Terry's data.
So
then I would contact Terry.
I don't know
can
how
see
they would
there
find
being-
out about it, but yeah.
Right. So I
Yeah.
can see having data that I don't even want to tell people is available.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I mean, I wouldn't want my data just to be in this list of, oh, if you think you might want this, contact
Right.
Terry. I would
Right,
rather,
right.
if it's something that I wanted to make available, have it be out there that they could, at that moment in time that they're thinking about it, be like, oh, see what that is, and click on it, as opposed to needing to request it.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think that data you upload yourself or share with a small group should be discoverable in the system. But what's probably going to happen is, Terry's going to share it with 3 other people, and then one of those other people is going to tell you about it, and then
Right,
you're going to get
right.
back and ask Terry about
So
that.
as long as
and that's just going to be reality. That's going to happen.
See, I think there's value to, I mean, I don't want it to be public, because I think when we go public, we need to have lots of things in check. But I think there's more squishiness internally, because we're all employed by the same organization. So if Brad has data that he feels is good enough that he is using, like, I kind of, in some ways, if I see Brad's name by it, I'm going to trust it enough to look at it and be like, yeah, that's kind of cool. And then make a call and get more information before I print it off and do something big. But it kind of puts the onus on us as individuals. But I wouldn't, definitely think it needs like checks and balances before it goes live kind of thing. But
Well, we're even thinking that it ought to have some sort of minimal vetting before it goes beyond the person who uploaded it.
at that
You're
point,
gonna
we
have
can
to
share it
at
with
least
somebody
tag
else.
it with things and explain what it is, put a date on it, things like that.
Yeah.
And maybe it needs to go through some sort of process to make sure that it's not violating HIPAA at that point. Even
Right.
before it's technically before it's uploaded, we would have to be aware of HIPAA and
Right, we have to
FERPA.
take a training to
Yeah.
know about HIPAA
Right.
and FERPA.
So also going back to this, let's say that you data, share it with me. Now, can I share your data? Or would it have to go back to you and you have to approve?
Right, you need to
it out.
figure out, are you sharing ownership or not?
Right.
That's true. Once it goes public, the ownership's
Right.
everybody.
Right.
So that's easy.
And you also don't want same data.
So these are all things that we need to put into what we were just moving through a half an hour ago when he said data governance structure. That involves rules, that involves meeting guidelines, and that involves people and the training. So there's a big issue around data upload. Data upload's a big thing.
Yeah.
But hearing Jin Cheng and Melissa hearing from the field, that was
It's huge, yeah.
huge.
Yep. I think at a
I think
minimum,
the people in this room, it's huge.
at a minimum, doing that training and having at least this is my personal data available. If there aren't any barriers to that, I think that would be really powerful.
That's a great big
Yeah.
first step. Even
Yeah.
if you don't share it with the rest of the extension or the public, having something you can use is great.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we can get the underlying tech and let the legal folks sort out the rest.
Right, but I would keep in mind that we want to be able to share.
Oh,
So
yes.
that
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
you're building your, so that when that committee gets together and comes up with their rules. Because I think the real power is going to be in that sharing.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, I would assume that 99% of the data we're talking about is not going to have the concerns we're discussing. It's that 1% that's going to get everybody in trouble.
Right. I mean, before we could just slap a disclaimer on our various sites and say, whoever commissioned us to make this website is responsible ultimately
Right.
for, your HIPAA and FERPA violations. But now it's right.
Right.
They employ us, so.
And they want you to do. True for them.
That's right.
Yes. Yep. But that's a good point. I mean, sharing is powerful. And that's the whole point of this, at least with an extension, is sharing.
I think those are the 4 big ways that we'll want to share.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
I can see in the past, uploaded the data, you're able to select, right? And how that worked, you can put a check on the level of the
Mhm.
sharing that you wanted, and I suppose
This
that's
is going to be a little bit more complicated.
Right.
right.
So you had an explicit group before.
Right.
So you explicit group or public.
But you can still do, like, if you went with like your smaller group, you could still just tag in
Mhm.
those people. I would assume that you would kind of have to know who they would begin with if you're just sharing it with a small handful of people.
Now, those people need to go through the training as well.
I don't know.
Because they would need to understand the sensitivity with uploading, I would think.
Would you allow sensitive data at all? I guess is a question. I guess I was assuming that you go through the training to learn what data not to put on the site, but maybe
I guess I was probably imposing my own understanding on this, that it would be what level of sharing would be appropriate for different kinds.
I see. So allowing that sensitive data under some sort of lockdown.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to CARES be in the model of storing sensitive data. You need to think through a whole another security framework for that.
Yes, there's for HIPAA data anyway.
And for
You have to restructure your internal data structure actually to separate and secure the data. FERPA has some slightly different rules. You can get by with a little bit less on that.
Yeah.
But it's almost as stringent.
But people are doing work with vulnerable populations, and
Mhm.
it's
Let's see.
geotagged. That could be sensitive, even though it doesn't meet the HIPAA FERPA.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I apologize for stepping out. I just, did you all talk a little bit more about the onboarding and other people can self-select? Because if it goes out to everybody, some person in ag may not be interested at all in something from youth and family, for example. Or do we want people to self-select to the impact areas?
Well,
Yeah.
It might be sorted by impact areas or
Tagged.
searchable tags, but I think part of the power of it being broader than the impact is that, like, being able to go into another impact area and look for what data you never knew existed.
Yeah, I think the power of these meetings we've been having is noticing that the lines are very blurry between all the areas, right? So maybe you don't want to just silo data like that.
Kim, you were talking about like the training. In some ways, I think so if, let's just put a big if out there. If in the vulnerable population, sensitive data were allowed, that technically met HIPAA standards.
Right.
I think that would most likely never go even extension wide. That would probably, maybe you guys could limit this, is you have to actually choose the people. And then I think it would be the person who's choosing those people's responsibility to train them about their data, as opposed to them being the general what data can and can't go up. But if you're choosing, if I were to, so in my case, it would be like individual student surveys, I mean, without the student's name on it, but like if I added zip code or even full address to my student surveys, and then I wanted to have that mapped for some reason, it would only be like these 5 team members that I'd want to be part of that. I wouldn't expect a system to train them, but I would, before I gave them access to that, be like, and these are the limits of the use of this data, if that were ever even allowed in the data.
No, I totally get that. I guess what I was getting at, and this is way too in the weeds from where we are at this point, is maybe for the ability to have one of those shared use, have access to have that shared use space turned on for me, as if you're sharing your data with me, that I would need to undergo some just basic understanding of what that.
Does this happen with Box? Because you can share your drive in Box with somebody else, or a file in Box with somebody else. What's the training?
Yeah.
Okay. So
There is no training.
Well, and
are
Box
those the
isn't-
standards you apply? I don't know. Is my
and
point.
Box isn't secure either.
Yeah, there is that.
Yeah.
But if you print out something or share a PowerPoint on Box, it doesn't say Box approves this. It doesn't say MU extension. You know,
I
so
wonder.
if you're adding a layer to a map, it says MU extension, or there's a
Right,
water.
but when you
line.
sign up for Box, you're also saying that you can have level whatever data.
Right, you have a term of agreement or
Yeah,
something. Yeah.
Maybe we just have to do that and say there's no HIPAA data, or I think those are the use.
Right.
Like Terry's saying, the FERPA level. So we need to think this through. Perhaps we need to discuss with IRB or
Right.
somebody like that.
Right.
Perhaps this is bigger than this group, is my point.
Yeah. And at a minimum, if we get to that point, having like either like a tech barrier, at least a tag that says this is sensitive. So if I see this data on my shared data, I know I can't drop this in. Even before I look at it, maybe I have to go through like the terms of use or something.
And then you can tag it and say, do not share this data.
Yeah.
Or something.
We'll give the folks on the phone a chance to think or respond to anything. We've been hogging the conversation. The folks on the phone have any thoughts on this?
Silence.
Very deep thought.
Anything about great?
Yeah. Okay. Well, if no one on the phone has thoughts, I think we should take a 10-minute break.
When we resume, we're going to have a data exercise. Everybody gets to have fun. Okay, so can we mute the sound here or not? We figured, how do we turn it on? How do we turn it off?
Mute up there.
Oh yeah, we'll mute the sound.
Okay, folks on the phone, 1 minute warning, 45-second warning.
Something like that. There's some things you guys don't have.
Sure. Tell them about the data list.
Yeah, so if you guys are the people that are kind of like joining us on the phone, the second part of this meeting, we're kind of going to start going over the actual data that we have culled from the previous meetings, from the work in the field, all the talk that have been, we've been having with a bunch of different folks around these impact areas. We shared this out as part of a Google document. I believe we shared it earlier this week and last week also. So there's a couple of chances to kind of look at this. Basically, what we're going to be doing is an exercise where we try to find maybe the top 3 to 5 or more or less of these pieces of data that is not only relevant to you and your work, but also kind of like maybe find another 3 pieces or so that would be what you believe would be kind of important to add to this skinny report, the CES report that we're also kind of looking at. So around the room here, I've put down some notepads if you want to just take some time and go through those and write those down. If there's stuff that you can think of that's not on the list, write that down also.
Or you can star it on the piece of paper we've handed out
and just hand it back in. Yep.
Folks online, you can go and send an email back or go into that Google Doc and note it some way.
Right.
We haven't really outlined the way for that, but send an email back with what would be a high priority for you or a high priority for you to say about this impact area to the rest of extension.
Right.
Those 2 data sets,
Yep.
those 2 points what we're looking for.
And then we also sent out a second sheet here, and also it's on that Google document as well as a tab. It's kind of the jurisdictions. We talked about that at one of our previous meetings, things that you might like to see as part of a geographic area to include to kind of help. We'll kind of pull the curtain back a little bit on this particular slide. You can see how we kind of internally prioritize some of this data sets. If it's collected regularly by a government or a trusted source, if it's as long as it's not like an undocumented piece of data where we can't find out where it actually comes from. Is it free and easily accessible? As it says here, if there's a charge or a fee associated with it, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to rule it out. We just need to kind of be aware of that. Is it specific to Missouri or not? What population would it likely positively impact? Is it useful across all of the different impact areas? And if somebody paying us to acquire it and integrate it. So what that basically means is maybe that's data that we've already found or are collecting for another contract that we're working outside of this particular one. So,
but we realize that these prioritizations aren't necessarily your prioritization.
Right.
So we want to hear your prioritizations on this list, and maybe for both things already on the list, or if we've missed something that's super important, we want to know and make sure that this is something that's put to the forefront. And the prioritizations could be for a particular data element, like I want to know the 1992 October unemployment rate, or it could be something like, give me the BLS data. So it could be vague or specific on that.
I had a comment this morning on the Google Doc, and I was looking through, and I don't think we had like the number of churches or religious institutions.
Yeah, I wrote that down on my notes here. But, and it
That
was
would be
in there,
good to
so
include, yeah.
Okay.
I think that Jinting had actually printed those out before you ended that in there.
Yeah, I was a late ad, so sorry, Jinting.
And that's fine. It's in there.
I
though.
added some
It's
today
in
too.
there. Oh, good.
I could tell somebody else isn't documenting.
You guys fight for space.
Yes. Let's see if I tell you of my data.
Will you add that to your top 3 now that you have the keys?
So we're going to our top 3 now.
Yeah, what's important to you, and then what's important you think would be for the rest of others.
Yeah, we
might not be the same data sets.
Okay.
Basically, what we've done is we've thrown a very wide net, right? We've collected, anytime in any of these meetings somebody said data, we wrote it down and we added it to the report. So we're kind of trying to zero in on kind of what we hope to put together for 2019.
And so if we hit the ground running in 2019, and you have data sets particularly important to you, and you want to see it up soon, we don't know about this, and we put it last on the list, you're going to be saying, well, why don't they have that yet? Why don't we have that yet? So that's what we want to hear.
Okay.
And just a little, as we added this morning, this isn't like once we get this list together, it's not like final, things are constantly changing. Priorities across the state are changing, priorities for extension are changing, for your programming areas are changing. But this is what we want to start with as we begin to develop for the next round. So as things come up, we'll definitely continue to be responsive and adaptive, but this is a starting point.
Right.
Now we play the Jeopardy music.
Folks on the phone, you understand what you can do? But just let us know if you have any questions.
Do you have any this date in history nuggets?
Today, I don't know what the date is. The 29th.
I don't school something about today having something to do with donuts.
I think every day.
Donut messages.
Different kind of.
Yeah.
Donuts for dads or parody.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
Everybody's furiously reading and writing. That's great. This is good.
So I think I didn't see on the boundary list school district boundaries, but I think that's because they're already in
We've
there.
already have
So you happen to have like school building.
Attendance zones, no, we won't.
Is that something
We can
that
get those for
math
some
for?
districts, but that's not statewide, is it? Is it statewide?
There is a NCES national data set on those, but they're a bit out of date. Those change, very like every year in some cases. So we can put something in there, but it'd be those current, not. I wouldn't like have a high reliability.
Yeah, that makes sense now that you just said that, because I mean, Columbia changes theirs all the time.
Yeah, right.
Hey, they're going to change it again.
They're going to change it again, even. Again. At least for the middle schools, maybe in high school.
You gotta get worked up to, if you can see the school, you're not gonna. That's the objective.
You have the area agencies on aging areas?
Do they? Do we have it, you say?
Yeah.
What is it?
The area agencies on aging?
I don't think
That's a they have areas?
They have service areas, yeah.
On the list there.
Yeah, it'd be good to find. I know some of those. When I looked on the Missouri Department of Health and Human Services site, I think like there were a bunch of different types of agencies and regions, and a handful of them overlapped, but not all of them. So,
Community action agencies might be another one.
Yes, very good.
Oh, yeah.
And this is something too, it's like if you think of something you tonight or tomorrow or something like that, that doesn't mean shutting the door on this process. Go ahead and shoot an email. We do kind of a soft deadline though, I guess a kind of harder deadline for us. Maybe December 5th is what I think we said we need to have this back by.
7, maybe. That's what we told the other groups.
Okay.
But you guys can start.
Well, it's the 5th.
Yeah.
Because you guys are that good.
Wow.
You want to get in first. No, December 7th at
that's
Or
fine.
that lags with deadlines that you have to give us an earlier one. Oh, wait, that's just me.
Yeah. That's a Wednesday. That's a nice
Well, you won't pay
day.
attention.
And like you said, Michael, this isn't gonna be the end. It's just gonna be this first iteration. Then with how we formalize the governance group and how we process new data as it comes on board, it's gonna continue.
Right.
I have another question about the population data. I saw on one list that it was like 5 to 17. Is it possible to break those down into like age groups within that? That would kind of target the elementary age, middle age, and high school age.
I'm trying to think of the American Community Survey. Is it broken year by year? I know in the decennial census we can get both gender and single year breakouts by age. I can't remember the American Community Survey.
I know we
I
do
think it
0
was
to
by
5
5 years.
and then 5 to 17.
Is it just or they do 5-year
I
groups?
think it's in
Somehow we're able to break it at 17. So I'm pretty sure they have a break at that age.
Here's the
Probably
population
14.
estimates.
We've got 5 to
Also.
9, 10 to 14, 15 to 19.
Oh, okay. 5 to
15,
9,
19.
10 to 14, 15 to 19.
Probably as fine as we can.
Close enough.
Nice round numbers.
Close enough.
High school?
Well, you gotta be able to
It's-
count teen pregnancy. As soon as they're 20, there's no more teen pregnancy.
I guess so, yeah.
It's true. It declines rapidly in your 20s.
Teen pregnancy solved by
Yeah.
Chris Burnett.
Another one I was going to ask about is, do you guys currently have the public schools and like point data for where the public schools are located?
Yes, but it probably could be updated.
It's
When's our last
updated every
update?
year.
We do it every year from the national, so I'm wondering if it should be updated to the Missouri.
Like I
This is
use the
sort of-
list off of DESI's website.
Right.
Yeah.
I think-
Pull it each year, but
I think this is an important differential with the All Things product line that we're calling it. So it's Missouri now, it'll be other states down the road. That's Marshall's vision. Wherever we can replace this national with the state level, we're going to get better data on schools, et cetera.
Because we'll have our state IDs in there. and all that.
right, like that would be awesome if the other county district codes.
Yeah,
Then
I believe
we
that's in the
can
data
link
set.
our
So-
stuff.
Write it down, highlight it.
Well, it's not on here, but I'm assuming that it's in there. But I'm gonna put
Yeah,
down
don't
the.
assume- yeah.
We're adding percent pre-reduced lunch at the LEA level.
Yeah.
Aren't they changing all the free and reduced lunch rules so that all the schools are,
They have a
everybody
community eligibility
is, and then
provision.
it's by tract or something?
Right, so it's no longer as
As a student.
informative,
Right.
like as it
Right.
used to be, and differentiating which one, like, there's no big difference between 70% and 100%. If you were 70%, you're
Okay.
data
They're still
entering
reporting the
100%.
percentages. They're just, it's no difference.
I thought you're in the app, isn't it? Your school in the app or something.
That's true, but I prefer them to report the percentages of the data set, as far as I don't know.
I hope so, but I don't know. that- Yeah.
Big metric.
Well, we've had some discussion on accredited preschools versus non.
Daycare centers. We talked about license, accredited, and
I think I added some
Religious.
comments,
Okay.
when I was in there, about like where the childcare programs were at, the Department of Social Services.
If you added
Oh.
sources, that's dangerous.
No, I did that on my list, or my network sheet that I haven't brought out to you guys yet.
Well,
Put that on.
maybe you need to leave it.
I will do that.
Couldn't do that. Nice.
This
Oh,
my
goodness.
spreadsheet, but that's where I did both by
Wow, that's
services,
great.
health, and social support.
Yeah.
Like, so that data would be available also. Like, so the
Wow.
Department of Health has a license programs.
Okay.
And then the Department of Social Services has the list of registered programs.
Okay.
Which means that they have a contract to provide subsidy payments.
Okay.
And then the Department of Health has a list of legally exempt programs. So there's like lots of these lists out there.
Okay. The logistics.
So before you get,
Like, oh, yeah.
before you get out of here,
Exempt from license exempt
we're,
are different things.
we're kind of fleshing out the idea of having that,
Welcome
maybe
to
not
our
a
shop.
month, and maybe like in 6 months, kind of get together.
I don't want to think about
Figure out if we're doing this correctly.
We'll be fair. Waiting list already.
no, my husband wants to say
Great, thank
it.
you.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming.
And that's scary.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Sounds good.
I know. And I'm like, I don't even think we'd be able to care for her for like the first year. There's no room in Columbia.
We found
get on the list
UCP, United
They're
Cerebral
one of the
Palsy.
best ones in town.
Yeah, and you think, oh, special needs only, but it's actually a mix of
Oh, that's
incomes and abilities. And my mother, she wasn't special needs, but she went there and had a great experience.
Mhm.
It's UCP, United Cerebral Palsy. You drive past it on iPhone,
It's on iPhone.
yeah.
cool.
And you think, oh, what a dump, and it's actually fantastic.
If you
United
think
Cerebral
my
Palsy,
husband is the
UCP,
video when she's free, put her on the way.
UCP, United Cerebral Palsy.
That's how it
I
works.
was there both.
Were you?
Angela
I
was
actually,
saying.
all three of my daughters went there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
we
there
got
are,
the
there are
call,
folks
and
that are
they're like,
special needs.
Yeah.
when
And
she's
what
like,
was really
"What?"
great about going there
And
is
so-
that one person needed a trach tube all the time, and she was wheelchair bound.
But UCP is one
And
of the.
girls were so young, they just grew up with them. The other folks,
Yeah,
and it's just, they're just good
I
friends.
know,
It's
but
not that they're
Bethany Hughes
different.
is what-
Yeah.
One needs more medical attention. They said, hey, you gotta put the trach tube in now after they eat, and something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's really a great organization.
I
It
would
used to be Easter Seals and they combined.
Yeah, we were there, started when it was Easter Seals and left as youth. And if I ever become infinitely wealthy, I'm donating them a van or something, because they struggle for resources sometimes.
Yeah, they do amazing stuff with that limited resources.
So keep working on your data if you need to, but we should wrap things up unless folks have some data specific questions. Or, again, we encourage people to email us, add to that Google document. December 7th is sort of our cutoff for getting started in 2019. But just recognizing that we know this is an ongoing process because programs change and data availability changes, among other things.
So maybe we should send out another email to everybody, because there's been, for all of these meetings, there's been people that haven't been here. Maybe we kind of like prompt people to send them. Also.
Yeah, that can be what you're doing with it.
I think that would be right.
Remember the fifth. So just the last thing that we wanted to talk about, get some feedback about, and let you all know about is our feedback loop for 2019. We've done a lot of listening this year. We don't want to be dictatorial with this stuff. We want all things Missouri to be adopted because people need it and people can use it. And so Chris Fulcher probably wants to talk about the governance group. Him and Blake have had some thoughts about ongoing, keeping the impact teams or a skinnier version of the impact teams or meeting less often, but keeping this quality feedback from you all going. So take it away.
Yeah, I think that's something that's going to be important, because this is not going to be a static thing with All Things Missouri. Issues are going to change. It's going to evolve. We're going to learn over the course of this board after the course of this year, after it's been built, what works, what doesn't. To have each of the impact areas continue a governance group, and looking to you all and the folks on the phone as well, is to be engaged as part of the governance group if you'd like to be. And I know, Michael, you'll send an email out asking again, would you like to be part of the governance group? We only meet.
We'll have people opt out.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the way I phrase it. If no one replies that they want to opt out, then you're automatically in.
want to be in it.
You're automatically in.
You'll have to let us know if you don't want.
Thank you. Remember that. Okay. But it's going to be really important also from a curation standpoint, the type of data that we get or some new tools, because CARES has a number of projects that are not related to extension that may inform what extension could do down the road. So there's some innovation that we can continue to provide there. I think that's it. It's just once every 6 months
or as needed.
As needed.
But as far as meetings, but we may be sending stuff out in between communications and so on, like Chris said, they try out this tool or something like that. We're hoping it won't be as intensive as it's been over the past few weeks with these meetings and the homework that you've had and so on.
But we really encourage you guys to email us thoughts, call us, stop by.
Or things that you hear from the rest of the extension community. That's the other thing you can
Yeah.
serve as that conduit or liaison
Mm-hmm.
to the rest of this group. Does that make sense? Concerns?
The folks on the phone, does that sound good to y'all?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. But the sound quality is so good.
Oh, it's a great room, isn't it?
Seats are comfy. So another thing that we've been talking about, we're starting to get pretty excited about it, is doing sort of a monthly brown bag lunch. So having like a Zoom meeting, maybe starting out with CESs, CPDs, field staff, really encouraging those folks to call in, but a way to regularly connect. So once we get some of these new tools up to say, okay, now we've got some things behind a paw print. Now we have the sharing folder, let's talk about it. And also reaching out to some of our power users and saying, hey, I saw that you posted this map. Can you talk about your thought process? Can you talk about, barriers or how you did this? And trying to both showcase new products or showcase specific features we think will be useful, but also facilitating communication among CESs around tools or around usage of tools.
To that point, how do you see this playing out? Because this phase has really been listening and engaging and learning and not building anything. What do you think would be, from a care standpoint, the build, the data acquisition, usable security? That's going to take some time. Do we want to engage people in webinars after it's all built, or do we want to start engaging them as we're building? What is the cadence around that?
Early and often.
Yeah, I would think we'd want, maybe not, December 1 or January 1, but sometime in the very early spring or late winter, we would get this off the ground.
Yeah.
I would think would be ideal, because we want the feedback as we're building it too.
Okay, so that's the key thing as we're building it, because it's going to be quite an ambitious thing to build it, but we don't want to leave people with months and months of nothing.
Right.
So, okay, that helped answer that. And we're hiring this guy.
Excellent.
It's part of the budget. And then, regular field testing, keeping in communication, especially that one-on-one communication with people out in the field, has been really valuable, as well as leadership and faculty and everyone in between. But that's something we intend to do fairly regularly. Is, okay, so you said you're using this. How are you using this? Give us a call, spend 10 minutes on the phone. And also having surveys and just trying to understand, without being onerous, just trying to understand how people are using or why people aren't using and what we can do. And just, other things around data. We had a meeting last week, it seems like so long ago, and somebody brought up, she's interested in secondhand marijuana smoke. Well, that data doesn't even exist yet, but this is something that we need to start thinking about in Missouri. This is new. This is relevant.
Where
This
you
meeting
sign
is
up?
being recorded. Yeah.
First, you have to distribute the product.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just understanding, being tapped in and understanding what people need and communities are concerned about is going to change. And then finally, just support material development. If there's anything in particular that you guys hear or are interested in, we've heard step-by-step guides are really important, and people love videos. We need little short videos to highlight different features or how to use something or how to get started with something. And I think the starter maps and that skinny report will also serve as support material, just different ways that people can get into that deeper dive, just having a quick view or a starter map. Might have had a chat. Is there a way to get state councils and governments to see where they are and through some initiatives they partnered with us and the impact it makes.
It's a good thought.
That's
That overlaps with all things Missouri and this, that impact engagements side.
Well, and it's, you're right, but
Link to that.
we're getting to that. I don't think we have that.
Right, it's not there yet, but
Right.
that's definitely a goal. Sorry, that's from John.
And thanks, John. In terms of partners, it would be really good to get a sense of who are the typical partners with Extension, because then we can grab their jurisdictional boundaries and use that as part of the footprint tool. And if you're in a city here is your partner delineation. Oh, I didn't realize it was these 4 counties as well, so something like that.
Yeah, it's a good thought.
So I think we're kind of at the end of our time here. Oh,
You got the last slide.
yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And really, this is so helpful. This is something that, again, CARES has not done before in terms of having some really good feedback on how we need to be building stuff. So thank you all, guys, on the phone as well.
Yep.
Well, you guys have done a masterful job of engaging us and not overwhelming us. So thank you.
Just worried.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we'll be in touch. Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, please.
Zoom or
Thank you to everyone on the phone.
does Jamie?
Thank you.
Good to see you, Cynthia. How's classes going?
I finished my grade school.